3 years ago, we started this channel to film videos of the construction of my Escort. Over the 2 years, I built the car to completion. But since then, we haven't shown the Escort on this channel. And for the most part, it's just been sitting in my garage, only taking out a time or two to post pictures on Instagram. I built the car with the intentions on taking the car to the track. But with all the track content we've been filming, we haven't had a chance to take the car out for ourselves. But NASA Mid-Atlantic reached out to us to invite us to the track this season, in HPDE, which means I've got a lot of work to do to get this car track-worthy. So I realize not a lot of you probably know much about this car. Since the last video we did with it, we only had about 35,000 subscribers. So let me tell you a little bit about the car first before we start working on it. So this is a 1998 Ford Escort ZX2, and it was my first car. I've actually been building it for like 9 or 10 years now. It is a fully built 2-liter with forged internals. I put a Roush turbo on it, got Volk TE37 wheels, Wilwood brakes, and I've gutted out the interior with hopes to go to the track, but I haven't actually been able to go to the track yet. Because we've been filming so many track days, we haven't actually had a chance to take our own cars to the track. But NASA Mid-Atlantic reached out to us and invited us to participate in their HPDE series, which we're stoked about. So Ben's gonna race his Evo and I'm gonna race this Escort, which means I have to actually get it safe and reliable for the track. So let's go ahead and tear into this thing and get started. The first order of business is the Pcb Ventilation. With more boost comes more crankcase pressure, and right now I don't have proper ventilation for that pressure. So I need to drill into my valve cover to add that extra ventilation. After installing the new valve cover with the extra ventilation, it was time to change out the oil to make sure it was fresh for the track. But when I loosened the drain plug in my oil pan, I found quite a surprise.
That's not good.
Coolant in the oil, which means one of two things. Either my head gasket's blown, or I have a crack in the engine block.
So the only way that coolant can get into the oil is through the head gasket. So it's probably through the head gasket. Maybe I put the head gasket on backwards. I mean, I can just take the head off, I guess. That's not going to be that much of a pain.
I had a friend come by with a borescope and confirm that there was coolant in cylinder number 3 and 4.
So we might be dealing with a cracked head or a cracked block, or potentially a warped head, or maybe the studs for some reason got out of torque value. I don't know.
The next step was to check the torque values on all of the head studs. When I assembled the engine, I used a click-style torque wrench. But since I was concerned about its accuracy, this time I bought an electric torque wrench.
Okay, so I think I might have found the issue here. When I'm torquing down this stud right here, thankfully with the digital torque wrench that I just bought, it's telling me that the torque isn't actually increasing past 70. As I tighten it down, it just stays at 70, which means it's not ever going to torque down any more than that. Which explains why it probably wasn't torqued down far enough, and maybe some others before, which means, yes, the head gasket's going to leak, which is why I have coolant in the oil. Basically, we have to pull the head off so that I can clean out some of the threads in the block to make sure those head studs seat all the way down so we can get proper torque specs on the head studs. So let's pull off the head. Alright, so I've gotten everything out of the way from the head, so I can just pull the head off now. I'm just going to take the head studs off, and hopefully nothing's in the way of the head, and I can just pull it right out. Alright, so as you can see, there's coolant in cylinder number 4. So clearly the head gasket was leaking or something like that, which means I was probably not getting full power in that cylinder as well. Probably burning up some coolant. And obviously the reason is because the head stud is very loose. I can turn it with my hand. Can't turn them all with my hand, but I definitely can turn that one. Oh, there's another one that's loose. So I got 4 studs that are loose. 3 of them are around cylinder number 4, which makes sense why that side of the head wasn't fully bolted down, which means the head gasket's gonna leak, causing oil and coolant to mix, which is what happened. So good to know that my engine's not cracked or anything like that. It was just the head gasket. So I'm gonna take these studs out, clean up the threads, and put them down, get them down as tight as I can, and see if we can actually get these things torqued down to the proper spec. is a tap, and I bought a tap just for this. This is like a $10 tap. I really want to make sure I got a good one, because I'm going to clean out the threads where the head studs go into the block. So I'm just basically going to run these down each spot here that the head studs go in to make sure the threads are real clean, so that the studs will actually go in properly without getting, you know, a little bit of dirt in the way, which was causing my problem.
After everything was put back together, I decided to take the car out to make sure nothing was leaking. I was very paranoid. I drove it a few miles and stopped to check everything over. Then I had to get into full throttle to make sure everything held together. It looks like we're all good. Back to where we started. Now I could finally get to work on the valve cover ventilation. I decided to route 2 -10 AN lines to a catch can to catch any oil that might work its way out of the ventilation.
Okay, so we are just a few days away from the first track day with this car, and it's clearly not ready. So I'm going to kind of do things handheld here for a little bit and just kind of point at things I'm doing instead of doing glamorous things with the Movi, because I gotta get moving on this thing.
This happens about every other day. For some reason, I can't get the car to start sometimes, so I kind of have to walk away and come back to it later. I don't know if it's a problem with a relay somewhere or if it's actually the ignition. So let's bypass the ignition and put in a push-button start. So basically I have to cut up these wires. This is the ignition, basically that went in the back side of the ignition column. So basically I just have to cut these up and then route them to the switches appropriately based on where they need to go, which is the tricky part. And also the boring part, so I'm probably not going to film too much of that. So here's my mess in trying to figure out how I'm going to do these switches. I think I've got it figured out, but we'll have to see once I actually try to start doing it. Alright, so I went out to the store and got a bunch of stuff. I got some 10 gauge wire and I got some 12 gauge wire, some more butt connectors, and a bunch of different switches that should work for basically like ignition, AC on. And then I've got one here for the actual, hold on, push button start. And it's like super industrial like, but it'll work. And if it does work, I will probably do something a little bit more fancy in the future. But for now, that's gonna work for me. Okay, so this is what I'm going to use for the switch panel for now. I realize it looks kind of janky. I made it a long time ago myself with Bondo, so it's not the best looking, but it works, it's functional. Accessory power, and then we've got ignition power, and then push button start. So that should be pretty neat. Alright, so we've got the wires all hooked up temporarily sitting on the ground there. They're eventually going to go over there, but for now we're just going to plug the battery in and see if it works. Go, start. It works! The car doesn't want to run right, but that's just because it's cold. But it does start! Alright, let's see if I can turn it off. Nice! Accessory off. We officially have a push button start on the Escort. So, I'm trying to redo all the wiring in here because it's just kind of a mess and probably a safety hazard. So I'm kind of spreading it out and up so it's out of my way, and so I can navigate it a little bit better in case I need to for some reason, if I have some kind of issue down the road. Kind of want it spread out. So that's what I'm doing now, as well as getting these gauges mounted up so I can actually see them as I'm driving. So the white on this one is also Okay, so in here I have got gauges all mounted up here with U-bolts. I think that's a pretty good way to do it. They're very firm, not going to go anywhere, and they're all angled towards me, towards the driver, so that's nice.
Down here, I've neatened up the wires behind here a good bit. It's kind of secured them so that they're not flying around and stuff like that when I'm on the track. And then down here, I've got this switch panel, which goes in place here. I'm working on putting a panel right here in this space to kind of cover up these wires, and also kind of give me somewhere to put more switches or gauges or something like that I might need in the future.
It was time to move on to the next project, my wastegate exhaust dump pipe. I currently don't have one. I've been dumping it right to the atmosphere in the engine bay, so I need to weld up a dump pipe to route the exhaust gases out below the car. I cut up some pipe that I had laying around the garage and made just a few welds, and before you know it, I had a dump pipe that fit. Now, there's only one last thing that I need to do.
Okay, so there's a couple holes in the firewall from when I took the heater core out and the AC and all that kind of stuff. So to plug those holes, I'm going to use just little pieces of metal and I cut them out to the same size as the holes in there, and I'm going to basically put them together with one bolt in between to kind of sandwich it, and it's not going to move that way. All right, that should do it.
That's all we have time for. There's still a ton that I need to do to this car, but it's safe enough and reliable enough for me to take it to the first track day, and that's what matters. I didn't get a chance to fix my blown suspension or replace the old tires on it, or even set up a proper alignment. I don't expect to be fast, but I do expect to have fun, and I'm sure I'll learn a lot more about what improvements I need to make after we go to the track, so stay tuned.